right, everybody. Welcome back to CUSA All Access. Dylan Simmons alongside Ryan Martinelich, Mr. Baby Gator, and we have a special guest this week. The MTSU Athletics head staff writer, Mr. Sam Doughton, has joined us. Sam, great to have you on the show.
Dylan, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here and talk about some Conference USA action with you guys.
Oh yeah, we got a lot of good action coming this week. But what do you guys? How's your week been thus far, Mr. Matt and Mr. Ryan?
I can't complain. You know, already halfway through it. Got another good weekend of sports upcoming, so just looking forward to get to Friday.
You see, pushed away from the past weekend action, but
Oh no.
But I mean, to answer your question, Dylan, my week it's off to a good start. The weekend was great. Unfortunately, women's basketball did drop their game at home, which was kind of tough to swallow there as an MT fan. But other than that, got to have an interesting spot in the timeout coordinator there. Very interesting little job I had there, thrown into the fire just like an hour before game time. So I was learning on the fly. It was really but great seat.
So did you just get told, hey, this is something you can do?
Yeah. So I basically was like, they were needing a sideline reporter, and they originally asked Ryan.
Yeah. And
then I was like, hey, if they need someone, I can pull strings at work and get off and be there. So I get there expecting to be a sideline reporter. I'm full on, on camera attire. They're like, can you be the TOC? I go, what's the TOC? And they go, that's a timeout coordinator. You basically tell everybody, at the scores table when we can resume play. It's
the basketball equivalent to the guy with the giant sign with
the football field. Yeah.
It's a critically important job, not only for the broadcast but for everybody.
Yeah. So I did that. That was pretty cool. Cool seat. It was right at right at midcourt. So it was awesome. Interesting little job. Had one little screw up, but we bounced back. We recovered. It was really fun. Really appreciate the time. Just getting to work in sports at any point I can. It's always a great time.
Yes, sir. Working in sports is always a fun time, no matter what position or where you are. So glad to hear that little story. But guys, I think it's time to get down to brass tacks. So I think we should start with Conference USA football. So there were a bunch of fun games this past week. We had, I think, a total of 4, or was it 2 or 3 at least, conference matchups. So, I think we should start. You want to start with Middle Tennessee FIU because that seems to be the one that's.
Mine as well.
We talk about Middle Tennessee a lot on this podcast, but I think that this week's game was especially special. Oh yeah, just ignore that. Ignore that. We're not homers, I swear.
You could see the MT logos over there. I wonder why we talk about them.
Yes, but I think it is warranted this week because Middle Tennessee has had, albeit I think we can all admit, a kind of a tough season, a 2-7 start. They've had a lot of difficulties, a lot of trials, a lot of tribulations, but this week against FIU, they found something special, and they just straight up dominated this game.
Well, we talked about on the pregame show on Saturday, right? First off, one of the keys to succeed was going to be getting off to that fast start. All right, and 17-0 lead in the first quarter pretty much cemented that fast start. So it was a great opportunity. Of course, they finished strong. No kind of third and fourth quarter slumps like we've seen at home, like we saw against, say, Jacksonville State. So just another great opportunity to get a win and at least a third one on the season.
Just really impressive, I think, on all 3 phases is what Rick Stockstill was talking about after the game. This is really the first game all year that they've not had a side of the ball that's let them down in some way.
Yep.
Nick Vadiato has had, I think, probably the best year a 2-7 quarterback has had up until that point. He showed again, I think, 270-something passing yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. Exactly what you want. Those touchdowns went to 4 different receivers, and all those receivers made plays after the catch to make it happen.
They did.
So a very exciting offensive performance. And then, defensively, when you're not letting up any touchdowns in the course of 4 quarters, and when you're scoring a touchdown and a safety yourself, not much you can complain about on that side either. Really unfortunate for FIU, who is still in the hunt for a bowl technically, but going on the road to Arkansas this week, probably not in the cards for them this year, unfortunately. And Middle has now got some momentum back, and it has a chance to win out the rest of the way, facing UTEP and Sam Houston, 2 of the teams that are definitely below them in the conference standings now that they've picked up their second conference win.
Yeah, I got to bounce off that Vadiato point. Is the best quarterback you've seen out as a 2-7 team. I mean, he's been shining on all cylinders. He's been kind of the guy that has carried this team to being tight into these games. I mean, he went toe to toe with Kadeon Salter at in Virginia against Liberty. They were one drive away from, taking that game as well. So Vadiato has really shined, and, it's something to look forward to in that tiny bright spot in such a dark season. You got to really look forward to it. And also, you're looking at here, you want to finish on a high note. You're playing against two teams that you should be able to take down in UTEP and in Sam Houston. But Sam Houston also had a big win against La Tech in Louisiana, if I'm not mistaken. They put up 42 against Louisiana Tech after some off-the-field altercations for La Tech's coach there. But besides the point, again, MT's now turning a page. You're looking to finish this season high. And as the fans, that's what they want to see. They want to see improvement on all cylinders. And I know for anybody that works alongside the team, that's what they also want to see. And it's, you can finish this season on a big win streak. You carry that momentum into next season, especially if Vadiato performs at a high level. You're pretty much set at, you can have a top quarterback in the conference heading into next season. So something to look forward to for MT.
Yeah, what I'll say about this game is I was really impressed by the defense. I mean, they straight up destroyed that FIU offensive line. They got, I think, a total of 4 sacks in this game, and they really pressured Keon Jenkins. I think I mentioned on Blue Raider Extra Point, and I think Ryan can back me up on this, that Middle Tennessee needed to have a sack race, as in get as many sacks as possible, pressure the quarterback. That's exactly what they did. They forced 2 critical fumbles, I think one in the first, one in the third. Richard Kinley got his first defensive touchdown, his first touchdown of any kind since middle school. I was talking with him after the game, and he was so excited. He went on the interview with WGNS. He was like, "Oh man, I was so excited. That's the first touchdown I've gotten since middle school." And I was like, "Really?" I thought for sure he would have scored since then, but he was just so pumped about it. But the defense, like I mentioned, they just continued to dominate all game. They got that critical safety on Jenkins. Got my teams mixed up there for a second, but you know what I mean. They got that safety late, and they played a style and a physicality that I haven't really seen this season. It was so cool to see, and I love what we saw. If they can keep that going throughout the rest of this year, it really makes me confident about where they are in 2024. Of course, there was a bit of an injury that I think is shaking a few Blue Raider fans. Trey Fluellen, obviously, with I think it was a torn ACL. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what he said in our Monday press conference. If you go back and look at the tape, he ends up breaking up a pass by sort of getting underneath the tight end's legs in the second quarter, and really excited about the play and jumps up and just lands a little funny. And I didn't notice it in the moment. I was barely paying attention to personnel getting out of hand. The game was the rest of the way. Figured we were working some guys in. That's why Marvay was playing. Teldrick Ross was playing back there. Jacoby Thomas was in concussion protocol that weekend.
That's right.
So he didn't play at all. So I was like, okay, they're just rotating some guys in. And then, when Trey walks in with a brace the next day, really unfortunate end to his college football career. He'll be walking at senior day this week, and I know it's particularly frustrating not even to hurt it on the play, but to hurt it because you were excited you made a play and jumped up, and just one of those freak things that happens sometimes. But to get to your point back about the defense, Dylan, I think the great thing and the frustrating thing about that game was that it was like what I thought this defense could be the whole year.
Right.
The defensive line, the way that they got pushed, Rick Stocksel talked about how they're able to get vertical push and force the other team to go horizontal.
Yes.
That was their bread and butter the past 2 years under Scott Schaefer, that was able to keep their defense toward the top of the marks and force turnovers and mistakes from other teams where they led the nation in turnovers 2 years ago, or in the top 5 last season. That hasn't really shown up this year, and I think that's because the defensive line has been, whether they've been beaten and banged up or just not gone against some better teams, has not been able to get the push they had the past 2 years. And having that aspect of the game opened up opportunities for everybody else. So that was really good to see at this point in the year. It's unfortunate that the first time we're really seeing it this season is in November.
Yeah.
But hopefully something with most of those guys coming back that they can feel good about going into next year.
I think it's definitely a confidence booster. I mean, when you have that kind of performance, you force four turnovers against a team, no matter what team it is, it boosts your confidence. It's like, hey, I can do this. We know what we're capable of. Let's translate that into every game we play from here on out. And there's still 2 more games left. And, of course, this upcoming game against UTEP is going to be a big one, senior day. There's going to be a lot of players who are motivated to go out at home with a big win. And you look at what they did against FIU, UTEP might be a worse team. So that just adds to the confidence and the ability that you have to go out there and get another big win. And I think Middle Tennessee definitely has the opportunity to do that. Going to be a fun one on Saturday. And, of course, like I mentioned, last home game of the season. So all the more reason to perform in a big way.
Well, the big thing, is of course UTEP's going to be coming off of a bye week, so they're going to be a little more rested.
Right.
And then can Middle Tennessee's defense kind of have that same momentum following the FIU game? It certainly helped, going against an offensive line that had been one of the more sack heavy, not only in CUSA but in the nation. You know,
Yes.
they came in and were giving up I think 28 or 29 sacks so far in the season, and certainly helped getting that pressure on Jenkins. Can they build up on that momentum going up against Cade McConnell, who I presume will probably be starting this weekend for UTEP?
Gavin
So
Hardison is out for
yeah.
the year. He had elbow surgery.
Yeah.
There we go.
Recently. UTEP brings a unique contrast, I think, to what FIU does. UTEP is very kind of old school pro style
Sure. Yep.
offense, way more under center than you see in college these days. Really leans on their two running backs, particularly Deontay Hankins, who's their sort of their bell cow back there. So offensively, I think they're a lot more time of possession, control the clock, and Cade McConnell's had some big moments this year for them, and really kept them in that Western Kentucky game.
Yes.
2 weeks ago. I'm more intrigued by what UTEP brings defensively. They're the #1 pass defense in Conference USA entering this week. Obviously, Middle's a team that loves to throw the ball around the yard. So what can Middle do against that type of defense, and will the offense be able to help them out from UTEP's side, controlling the clock and limiting the amount of possessions? Could be a little closer than some people think, and I think that's why the line's maybe a little smaller than it was last week. Despite the fact that I also agree with you that I think UTEP's the worst team compared to FIU.
Yeah.
And
I would agree with that.
I just wanted, so that was something that, UTEP coming in as a top, passing defensive team in the conference is, I wanted to see, I like the big one. You put 40 up at home against any team, that's a big win. And, the offense was clicking in the passing game. But I just wanted to see a little bit more from the run game. I understand, Vadiato has been leading the charge a lot, and that's a lot to ask from your quarterback. I mean, we even see in the NFL at times where, for example, Josh Allen, who leads his team in rushing, at times it can just really wear down your offense at times because your quarterback is either A, running so much, and then when he's not running, then they know, all right, we stopped him. Now we just got to play the passing game. Working in Credle and working in Peasant a little bit more, kind of I would want to really get that run game going just to keep it. You want to keep it in the back of their minds. You don't want them to completely abandon it, but you also don't want them to just, be able to sell out for it and stop it. You want to just have it to where it sprinkles in here and there. So just something I want to see, in these last couple of games, to see that run game get a little bit more in depth. I know I love that, air raid style, throw the ball around, let's, get some big plays here and there, but also, having that run game, sprinkled in to where you're not just, they can play the pass, put 5 yards back and not having to, play as much, stacking the box and stuff. Just something I want to see heading into these last couple of games, especially against UTEP, whose pass defense is very potent and could stop Vadiato from, working his magic.
And that's the big danger with it, right? I mean, with the #1 pass defense in CUSA, and you got a team that really likes to pass the ball, it's going to be kind of like an unstoppable force against an immovable object. So, going to be a good game there. But there was another big CUSA game, a really huge one when you look at the overall scope of the conference that happened this past week. Western Kentucky against New Mexico State. And this one was big because New Mexico State, as we all now know, has punched their ticket to the Conference USA Championship game. So we do have it set. It's going to be in Lynchburg, Virginia. Liberty versus New Mexico State. And what impressed me again about New Mexico State in this game is that they were down 14-0 in the first quarter early. WKU was really playing them hard and playing them well and executing early. But something about this New Mexico State team, guys. They find ways to grind out wins, even when it really seems like they shouldn't. And Diego Pavia wasn't the most explosive player in this game. He had 141 and 2 touchdowns, but it was the unsung guys like Eli Stowers, who was stopped for basically all the game. I think he got like 0 yards besides the fact that he had 2 touchdowns that just came out of nowhere. It's difference makers and X factors like that that New Mexico State has, and it's been huge for them all season. Now, the question is, will they be able to translate that into the Conference USA Championship game against Liberty? Because let's not forget, the last time that these two teams met was earlier this season. It was back on September 9th. It's been a long time since then. New Mexico State lost, I believe, by a score of 33-17, but a lot has changed, and I think New Mexico State has gotten exponentially better than they were back then. So how does that factor into this Conference USA Championship game? That's going to be the big question. I'm curious to see how it's all going to play out.
I mean, New Mexico State is just such a well-coached team. I think the fact that they can win a game against Middle Tennessee, 13-7 one week, and then go around and get in a bit of a shootout with Western Kentucky the next week,
yeah,
speaks to their moxie, speaks to who Diego Pavia is as a leader, as a quarterback. And just the overall, program that Jerry Kill's put together in just 2 years' time. This is the first time New Mexico State's going to go to back-to-back bowls since 1960.
That's crazy.
Is this season?
That's crazy.
So pretty an unprecedented run almost for the Aggies this year, and very exciting for them to get in the Conference USA title game. There was a brief 2-hour window today on Wednesday when we were recording where it looked like Jacksonville State might get back in the picture if they get their waiver approved.
Right.
That waiver was not approved, so they're not eligible for the Conference USA championship game. But there was, I remember seeing on Twitter or X or whatever we call it now, some fans being like, "Well, New Mexico State's selling tickets already. Like, what's going to happen if Jacksonville State gets eligible and now we're playing a winner-take-all game?"
Yeah. One week. Yeah.
That would get pretty wild, but thankfully that's not a problem. Thankfully everybody can plan ahead and work out there. Yeah, I think New Mexico State plays Auburn this week, so I'd be curious, if they're resting anybody honestly this week.
Right.
I would be tempted to do that going into the Plains and just sort of let some guys get healthy, not worry too much, and at this point in the season you have some players that probably worked their way up into some playing time that are still redshirt possibilities, haven't played in 4 games yet. And so you can work in some of those younger guys and get some more depth for the stretch run, particularly as you get into true postseason play. And Liberty probably has too many athletes on both sides of the ball for it to be much of a contest, in my opinion, particularly in the trenches where I think Liberty has really dominated this year. But excited to see the Aggies try because I think they're the most exciting team to watch night in, night out in Conference USA.
Yeah, you mentioned the Liberty defense. I mean, the thing is, I think they lead CUSA in forced turnovers. I mean, that defensive backfield is something to be reckoned with, and it's certainly would prove to create Diego Pavia into a one-dimensional quarterback if he's only having to rely on his legs.
Right.
And it is kind of unfortunate. Like it's a good thing that you don't have to worry about that contingency plan if you're New Mexico State. Yeah, what if that waiver was approved? But you also do kind of feel bad for Jacksonville State because they, along with James Madison, I know talking about a Sun Belt team, but along with those two teams have just prove that coming up through the ranks that you can be successful and find ways to win in your first and second years at the FBS level, and you're kind of penalized because I don't know, Sam, if you have an opinion on this about these old world rules regarding transition teams and the probation that you have to face for the first couple of years being ineligible for the postseason.
I mean, I think it's changed a lot with the type of financial windfalls that you can get from bowls, since bowls are far more ubiquitous than they were probably back when the rule was made. It's if you win 6 games, you get in the bowl. It used to be if you have to win 8 or 9 to feel really strong.
Yeah, ranked and a conference champion. Yeah.
And so it is unfortunate. I think Georgia Southern went undefeated in the Sun Belt in their final transition year, and this is something Middle went through when they came up to what was called 1A back in the year 2000 when they played their final year of transition. And so I think from a wide perspective, they know the rules. Yeah. They agree to the rules. I agree the waiver shouldn't have been given. But it is a broader conversation that, particularly for the FCS to FBS transfer, there's not much that we're really getting with here. Like these teams, particularly the teams that are getting called out from the FCS, tend to be perennial playoff teams at the FCS level, national title contenders, as James Madison is and Jacksonville State was. Sam Houston has won a national title at FCS level. They're not doing so hot this year, but they've had that ceiling, right? And so if they can come up and compete right away, particularly in that second year, I really don't think there's much need for it anymore. And particularly now that they're probably going to play in a bowl anyway, just because there's probably not going to be enough 6-6 eligible teams in the FBS this year. So given that, and given that happens every year for the most part, there's very rarely not at least one 5-17 that sneaks in there given the number of bowls.
And I was about to say, because they usually look at the academic progress rate for those 5-7 teams. So would in this theoretical situation with the bowl games, would a 5-7 team still get over James Madison? Because
so James Madison, Jacksonville State get the first priority.
Okay, and that's why I figured, and that makes sense in that retrospect. So that's why I figured. Just wasn't 100% sure.
Yeah, but I think that one's outdated. The one that I think is less outdated is the Division II to Division I transfer rule. Yeah. But that one, I think, instead of it being a 4-year transition, it should probably shrink down to 2, because having teams be out of the conference championship picture for 4 years, you can't recruit anybody to your university.
Not for that one.
Hey, high school senior, you're not going to compete for the conference championship your entire time.
And we saw that, in basketball a couple years ago with Bellarmine. In the A-Sun. So.
Yeah.
I mean, it's we saw the power that James Madison had last year. I mean, they came, and we played them early on, and then everyone's like, oh, MT's gonna, it's an easy, kind of prove me game, see what they got. And James Madison came in, and they came in hot, and
Hooked 'em.
so I mean, it's definitely one of those rules that it's one of those old rules that is just set in stone, and like it's not much they can do. I mean, they're putting up the best case of all time of why they should be why other teams should be eligible. I mean, when you go undefeated, pretty much in I know they still have a couple games left, but they've looked phenomenal all season long. So I see them as finishing it as an undefeated team, and we've seen just with this year in the conference with Jacksonville State. I mean, they've put up great games all the way around. They were neck and neck with the SEC team in South Carolina there on the road. So definitely there's a lot of talent coming into these new teams coming in, and it's just hopefully as a fan for these schools, as for the kids that are attending these schools, you want to see them be able to have that opportunity and play at the highest level. Because again, you have your seniors that are like, oh, sorry, man, I know we just bumped up to a higher level of competition. Sorry for you can't do anything. Good luck. So it's just.
And I think the important thing to know is that like the way why these rules were created was to ensure that these universities were supporting
the scholarship
their programs enough, from scholarships, facility funding, all that. Lots of things go into supporting a FBS program and a Division I program, and so if James Madison, Jacksonville State clearly meet that criteria.
Yes,
Sam
absolutely
Houston clearly meets that criteria. I think the 1 year transition is enough at this point.
Sure.
That's just my opinion. I'm speaking only for myself here, but I think the evidence at this point is clear after we've seen, particularly the last 10 years or so of those transitions.
I'm with you. I think there's just been too many instances of teams who have been in the FCS, coming up to the FBS level and having that level of success. And with James Madison, who's been in the FBS for a couple years now, it almost seems wrong to take that away from them. To me, if a team's competing and they have that level of competition and that level of success, then it's hard for me to say why shouldn't they get a chance. But I understand, like you mentioned, there's a lot of NCAA rules that go into that. I guess it's just one of those questions that will continue to be asked and continue to be addressed until something's changed about it. So it's interesting, but I know we've been dwelling on football for a long time, but there is one more thing I want to ask about this, because with this USA Championship game, you have two teams that were not in CUSA a year ago. Now they're in Conference USA. I guess that shows, because there was some skepticism about adding these teams to CUSA, but now you've got two teams in who, we expected Liberty for one, but like New Mexico State, I'm completely surprised by that. So it shows, I think, the Conference USA kind of made a good decision with bringing these teams in, or at least that's what it seems like on the surface, because they've done a good job of proving themselves in football this year.
I've been high on all four programs that Conference USA added, particularly in football. And I think Liberty and Jacksonville State and New Mexico State for all sports. Sam Houston, I think, still has some work to do in a lot of their Olympic sports to get to the level they need to compete. Sport in, sport out. I think the fact that there's two newbies in the Conference USA title game speaks more to the types of seasons that Middle, UTEP, Western Kentucky have had this year.
Yes.
Teams that were expected to be in that conversation. La Tech and FIU were still in year two of under new coaches, still trying to transition in and get into that system in. Expectations were higher for Middle. Middle was picked third to start the year. Western, I think, was picked first overall. And to completely, in Western's case, miss the title game, and in Middle's case, to miss a bowl is a lot of hard questions are going to be asked internally in those football offices about what went wrong this season, and hopefully we'll have some answers for them in the months to come. But I think it speaks more to what those programs, not to take anything away from what Liberty and New Mexico State have done this year, and Jacksonville State has done for that matter. But Middle, Western, and UTEP this year should have had the expectations that they did, and they've fallen short of them. And I think that's the frustrating part for those programs, and I think you see that online with the sentiment of it sometimes. But I think that's something that it's also hurting the perception of Conference USA nationally, that these new schools can come in, instantly be competitive. Despite the fact that I think you guys watch it week in, week out, football's pretty fun and pretty competitive in this league. And the teams are punching above what their records show a lot of the time, particularly Middle, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. I'll tell you what, it's going to be fun to watch this Conference USA Championship game, and really it's been fun to watch these teams, especially the new teams, come in this season and contend and prove themselves. So pretty awesome. So now that we've talked about football for like 2 hours, let's move on to some other sports, because they do in fact exist, guys. What? So yeah, I know, it's crazy. Anyway, so basketball, that's also been taking place this past week, and there's been a lot of Conference USA action since we last met. I mean, a week in basketball terminology is an eternity, so we had 2 or maybe even 3 games for some teams between now and then. So I want to ask you guys, what are some of the games that stuck out, one of the performances that, really registered with you and maybe you were shocked or surprised by?
I got to talk about the game that I was at. MT was riding high. I can't remember the exact number of the consecutive wins at Murphy Center. It was
29 in the regular season. I think it was like 18 or 19 overall.
Yes.
So yeah, MT came out in the first half. In the first quarter, they were. It looked like they were clicking on all cylinders. Gregory was shooting it from down the arc. She was hitting her shots. It seemed like MT was a well-oiled machine, and then that second half, they just kind of hit a wall offensively, and then defensively as well. It just it felt like Princeton was just having their way in the paint. I think you had a post about it. It was like I think you said it was probably the best 0-point performance you have seen.
Yeah, Ellie Mitchell, I believe is her name. She's double zero for Princeton. At the end of the third, she had 0 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, and I think 1 turnover. She ended up hitting a shot in the fourth quarter that just sort of rolled off the front of the rim and in. So,
your point,
she
ruined your point. But yeah, I mean, just on the offensive glass, I mean, they were getting consecutive second chance opportunities, and it's just something you don't see out of MT. And it's especially a team that this is their first time, I believe, playing Princeton, and so they was a kind of different team. But Princeton is a good team. I think pretty sure they were at the top of the Ivy League last year.
They made the second round in NCAA tournament.
Yeah, so they were it wasn't like a team that was just going to roll over. But I mean, this was going to be a good prove me game for MT. And they, again, started out very, well. Their offense was clicking. They were, defensively. I heard a lot of fans. I had a couple Princeton fans right behind my right shoulder, and they were screaming. It was like, if you're gonna call fouls, call it for both teams. That's my favorite. Is like when you're down there, you can hear all that stuff.
Gosh.
And it was just like they had it, and then I guess Princeton just had a click in the locker room at halftime, and they turned it around. And heading into these next couple of matches against Michigan and the Bahamas and stuff, it's really going to be interesting to see how this team performs. They had that championship run, where they won the CUSA tournament, and they were the team to upset the higher seed last year. They were expected to take down Colorado, and Colorado came in to Cameron Indoor, was able to take down not just MT, but also take down Duke and make a little bit of a run there. So it's gonna be interesting to see. I trust Coach Insel and his staff to turn this team around and really because I still think they are the team to beat in the conference. I still think they're at the top, and they're going to be. It's gonna be interesting to see how it goes in for these final seasons. For Savannah Wheeler and Courtney Whitson, of how they're going to take charge as the leaders on this team, and just how they want to go out. So it's gonna be interesting to see how women's basketball tends there.
What are you doing?
Sorry, I'll just move on.
It was a little bit of a fluky game, I think, in some respects. I mean, if you look at the score line for middle, I think Joe Gregory was like 5 for 20 from the floor.
Yeah,
that very rarely happens. So you make a couple of those 3-pointers, game totally flips. But the good thing about that is 2 things. One, the loss happened early. It gives them a chance to focus up the rest of the way against the rest of the tough non-conference schedule. And number 2, unlike the loss they had on the road to Mercer last year, who ended up finishing pretty towards the bottom, to SoCon, Princeton's going to finish towards the top of the Ivy League and be in that one of the best mid-majors in the country conversation. So net-wise, that's not going to hurt you as much as it will as some of the other losses might the rest of the year. But yeah, I mean, definitely something the team's gonna have to learn how to respond to, and with the tight bench that Rick Insel plays, a physical game like that can wear on a team at times, and I think that's something that they're gonna have to learn how to adapt to with the structure of the team that they have this year. They'll probably be running a 7 or 8 person bench most of the time.
I would say, yeah, you mentioned that tight personnel, tight bench, because they only played 6 in that first match, if I'm not mistaken, to open the season. So, which I thought was an interesting choice, but it's not uncommon, especially I think with how well prepped the athletes are these days. They're more physically in tune with their bodies, with their minds, sharp on the court and in the film room. So it's and certainly with a veteran coach like Insel, it's definitely not uncommon to stick with your 7 or 8 best players.
I mean, that's also an expectation they have for their starters. Joe Gregory, Savannah Wheeler, Courtney Whitson in particular are expected to go 40 minutes a night if they can.
Yes.
And Anastasia Boldreva's getting to that level given the growth that she's had starting the year off. So it's something to keep a watch on. I've been impressed by Tamia Scott. I've been impressed by Yulia Grabowski. And Sifa Anize just got in. That was the first game she was eligible against Princeton. So excited for her to gel and get a chance to make an impact. FIU transfer, supposed to be a sharpshooter. Pretty good defense and pretty good length. But intriguing. Lady Raiders are always fun to watch. I always think that they're the best version of women's basketball that I've got a chance to cover in my career so far, and I've really enjoyed learning their style, learning their plays. I mean, it's the same plays Rick Insel ran at Shelbyville High School, from what I've been told. So, get on out, see the Lady Raiders. Should be back after they get done with the Battle for Atlantis this week.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch them this entire season. And I think the important thing is to remember, I'll keep this brief as well, they have a lot of great talent on the team. Jalen Gregory is a great three-point shooter. And I think Savannah Wheeler was the CUSA Player of the Week this past week. And she's averaging, I think, over 18 per game right now. Incredibly great player. They only lost by 5, and it was kind of a fluky loss, I think, in some ways, because they weren't shooting at the level that they should. I don't remember what the exact shooting percentage was for this game, but it wasn't what they usually get. I think Jalen Gregory had 21, but was 5 for 17 from the
25% from 3 in the
Yeah.
game. And so, it's definitely, you're lucky it happened early on. Definitely not, not a later on game. And it's an out of conference game.
Right.
So again, it's not one of those that, you don't want to lose, but it's also one of those you're like, man, you look back at it like, this is a game you probably should have had. I mean, it's, again, a couple bounces here and there, and it's a completely different game. So it's one of those things, you don't want to take it too close to heart, and you don't want to take it too, put too much pressure on yourself. So again, just a tough loss for them, but, looking to bounce back in the Bahamas. So.
Yep, and you're still trying to find your identity early in the season as well. So also going back to that, MTSU men's basketball played this past week, and of course we saw it was Monday night actually, tough loss against Western Carolina, and I did want to briefly touch on that because MTSU played really hard in that game, and Western Carolina has been a very solid team as of late, and you've also got to remember that MTSU just lost Cameron Weston, something about torn ACLs recently. I mean, it's just getting MTSU. So they've lost one of their preseason All-Americans for the year. And Sam, how do you think this MTSU team is looking moving forward now with where they are?
Well, one thing Nick McDevitt said after the Western Carolina game is that there's no one-for-one player for anybody that's on MTSU's roster. There's nobody that's really the same archetype of a player. And the unfortunate thing is that Cam Weston is really the only true point guard that they have on the roster. The rest of the guys that can play point are a little bit more score first. And you saw it in that Western Carolina game. Only had 3 assists. Lowest since I believe the 2018-19 season in a game for Middle Tennessee. So they got to find a way to distribute better. Some of that was they just missed some shots that would have been assists otherwise. That game didn't shoot very well against Western. But they're going to have to find new roles. And this was a team that was already having a lot of guys having to learn new roles this year, playing a lot more than they're used to, playing with different guys than they're used to. And so it's just another adjustment this team's going to have to make now with their All-Conference USA guard out the rest of the season. It's something adjustment I think they can make, but it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time in the gym for Coach McDevitt and the rest of the staff and the players to really figure out what the new normal is when Cameron was a guy that they're going to look to really run the offense and set up other guys in addition to the scoring 10 to 15 a night easily.
Right. I mean, I think that when you look at that injury, like you mentioned, he runs a lot of this offense. It's going to be tough for MTSU to have to fight back from that. But you still have a very talented roster. I like what we saw from Justin Porter late in that game. A couple of really clutch shots to almost come back in that. So really solid stuff from him. It's going to be interesting to see how MTSU progresses moving forward and if they're still at that level. Because remember, they were picked to be a preseason CUSA champion. I believe they were tied with Liberty. So very, very good team. They've got a lot left on their plate, and it's very early in the season, much like women's basketball. So a lot of time left on that. But I'm going to move on quickly here because I do want to briefly touch on this as well. MTSU volleyball and the entire Conference USA will be playing the volleyball tournament coming up this weekend in Lynchburg. So I want to kind of get your opinion on this for everybody, especially since you guys have seen volleyball, all 3 of you, in some capacity this season. What are your thoughts going into volleyball, and what do you think is going to happen? What's going to be the course of this tournament?
I'll start it off. I mean, obviously, you're talking about a top 25 team in WKU in Western Kentucky who is 74 regular season conference win streak dating back about 4.5 years now, I think.
Gosh, that is
you're
insane.
Dealing with an offense that has been so efficient, that their setter Callie Bauer was setter of the week, if I'm not mistaken, or has a couple times this year, and was one of the key cogs in the MTSU
she was the best
series.
player on the court
Yeah.
this weekend.
And they couldn't stop her dump set down the middle. There's no way to. And if it wasn't her, it was their freshman Izzy Vanderweely down the middle. I think 12 or 13 kills in the Friday matchup. No attack errors.
Man.
All right. So if it wasn't Bauer, it was Vanderweely. Now what helped in at least the Friday's match that compared to Thursdays were the outside hitters were heavily involved in Friday's matchup. Kayla Henley and Adria Rhoda were alive and well to at least supplement the MT offense. It wasn't just Deja Smith and Kaylee Oscarson feeding the ball to the Hilltoppers side. Defensively, also Aaron Eisenhardt and Lala Janssen really stepped up, and that's going to help move the momentum to the CUSA tournament because they're going to be the 3 seed. Tied with New Mexico State and UTEP, but because New Mexico State swept MT and we swept UTEP,
yeah.
it's
Lots
New
of
Mexico State
tiebreakers.
2, MTSU 3, UTEP 4. So it's going to be interesting to see how the top 4 really play out in the tournament. Because UTEP also had a pretty good year as well.
Yeah, no, I think the big thing from Middle's perspective is that they're on the opposite side of the bracket
Yeah.
of Western. So you would have liked to have been the 2 seed because the difference between the 2 seed, who I believe is playing Louisiana Tech.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is Louisiana Tech.
Yeah.
Jacksonville State is 8. Jacksonville State's
This is the
8.
first Conference USA tournament Louisiana Tech has made since joining Conference
Yeah,
USA.
yeah.
And they made it with like a 3-13 conference record this year. And then you have Middle playing FIU, who's much more savvy, 8-8 this year.
Right.
Obviously took, I think both games from them down in
A
Florida.
split. It was a split. But both with the 5 sets,
Yeah.
though, and they were very competitive. Very competitive.
So the very, very tough game out of the
Yeah.
stretch for Middle. But you don't have to face Western until a championship game potentially. So you got to, and I think that Friday game in particular gave Middle a lot of belief in themselves that they can do it. And, I think they had, 3 times set points in the third set of that game. Yeah,
4, because it was 24-20 in third set, and there was there's just no answer for Bauer and Vanderweely. You kind of limited Paige Briggs, who was pretty much was the preseason CUSA Player of the Year. Is probably going to be CUSA Player of the Year anyway. Pretty much replacing Lauren Matthews and Katie Eisenbarger from last year's team. So she's done a tremendous job in her 5th year. So just hats off to her, and apparently she's engaged. That was something. That was something that Coach Crawford and her were talking about pregame. Was she had recently gotten engaged? So
Congratulations.
You see that more and more with so many players in their 5th and 6th year of college ball these days. It tends to be a little bit more common than you would think otherwise.
Yeah.
But no, I thought Conference USA volleyball was extremely exciting this year, particularly Middle being a part of that conversation. Such a hats off to Chuck Crawford and the staff and the players for coming together this year and putting together the first 20-win season since 2010.
Yeah.
It's been really exciting to watch. Volleyball's where I cut my teeth when I was y'all's age at UNC and covering their team down there. And so one of my favorite collegiate sports. I think it's the most underrated is not the right term because everybody who watches it rightly rates it. But
Absolutely.
the most unknown, that people slept on, that people don't know about. And I think, this weekend in Lynchburg is going to be really, really exciting. I think particularly the semifinals, if it's chalk in the first day, is going to be really, really tough because, UTEP facing Western Kentucky, UTEP's team can give them some problems.
Oh, yeah, they could.
Particularly on neutral court. And so I think, starting Saturday, if the teams that are top seed teams win, you're going to see, 3 really great matches to end things out.
But yeah, that UTEP match against WKU, if it does transpire, I mean, I think Kaya Weaver was Defensive Player of the Week for CUSA. I think 2.3 blocks per set she averaged in her weekend series. So if anyone's going to at least slow down the WKU offense, it'll probably be UTEP to start with.
Yeah, and you don't count out Liberty, who's the home team this weekend. They're the 5 seed. Obviously, they're a team that has the potential to. I think they were picked pretty highly at the start of the season and entered at least conference play feeling pretty good about themselves.
I think injuries were a part of the MTSU series that they kind of struggled with. That's what Coach Crawford was talking about. Because Madison Blaine was in and had been atop the CUSA charts in blocks and was really limited because they were thin in the defensive line behind her.
Yeah.
But if they're a healthy team, yeah, they're absolutely ones to be reckoned with.
So I just want to. I mean, you guys know more volleyball than me, so I'm gonna give you all the. I'm gonna put it out there. I'm not. I've covered a little bit of volleyball. You gave me your the quick rundown for dummies, but I've just been looking here. WKU's losses were to Arkansas, who was ranked 10 now.
Yes.
Penn State ranked 14. Dayton, who's ranked 19. So these are top ranked teams, and as MTSU homers to sort of say. I mean, we're representing, obviously, MT. So if you are on the outside looking in, what is MT's X factor if they're looking to take down a powerhouse team in WKU if they meet in the tournament, from the outside, analytic point of view?
Unfortunately for Middle, I think it's a matter of you're going to have Western make a few mistakes that you don't necessarily force. The sets that Middle was really competitive in this past weekend were sets where Western had a lot of service errors.
Yeah.
And that gave Middle, sometimes 3, sometimes as many as 5 or 6 extra points in that set. And then on top of that, you got to play pretty perfect the rest of the way.
Yes.
Taylor Eiser's got to be clinical and where she's going with the ball, et cetera, which she did at times this weekend, and then there were times where maybe
certainly more in the Friday match. And I think you brought up a good point. You've forced the errors. Take Bauer out of the equation on your own serve.
You got to serve incredibly tough.
Yeah. So and of course, and another thing is you got to also read the play. It's hard because she is very difficult to read as a player whether or not she's going to dump that quick set over top or if she's setting up, Kaylee Cox on the outside or even Paige Briggs.
It's not even really a dump. She swings it.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, but being able to take her out of the equation early in the sets and try to get your back line kind of situated where if she does come over the top, you might be able to save it because there were times that Isert or Janssen kind of got under it and were able to save the point right there. So.
Well, and from Western's perspective, you mentioned the rankings, the types of losses they have. If they take care of business this week, win comfortably in the Conference USA tournament, they are, knocking on the door of hosting, first round site
Right.
in the NCAA tournament, which is, something they strive for every single year with where they've got that program. And something I think they can do depending on how, the bid sites and how the rest of the weekend works out for them. Very, very interesting conundrum for the selection committee in that regard because I think the resume's good enough for it. It's just I hope they give them the nod.
Well, it's probably good enough even for an at-large as well. I mean, that's the thing. They don't even have to necessarily win to most likely get in with their RPI as high as it is. But you're right. I mean, a couple of good wins down the stretch essentially take Travis Hudson's 12th conference title, conference tournament title. In his 29 years there, going back between Sun Belt and CUSA.
Well, they were an at-large selection last year. Rice was the tournament technically. That's how they get that 74 regular season Conference USA wins, so they can avoid sometimes they lost to Rice in the conference tournament.
And Rice was a great, solid team last year too. Yeah. So, but now they're in the American Athletic Conference. But yeah, that's pretty much the road for both WKU and MTSU.
I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. And I love that volleyball analysis. We have not seen that level of volleyball analysis here on the show before. But Sam giving some great information and great stuff from Ryan as well. So awesome stuff, guys. I do want to give a brief because my producers and my people in my ear telling me that we're running pretty close to where they would like the show to end. But you know what? It's okay. We might go a little over, but that's fine because I want to ask Mr. Sam here a few questions because, he's our guest and I want to make him feel welcome and just kind of delve a little bit into your story and hopefully you won't mind a few questions being asked here.
Nah, put me in the hot seat. Let's go for it.
All right. So, and you guys can feel free to ask him some as well for this little interview segment, we'll call it. So I want to hear about your story. Give us a little background into what brought you into MTSU. How did you get involved with print writing, and how did you end up being involved with MTSU athletics?
Well, the print writing part goes all the way back to when I was in high school. I took an introduction to journalism class my freshman year. Met a teacher, Mr. Hampf, who was a former sports writer in the central North Carolina area where I grew up here in Winston-Salem, and joined the newspaper staff at R.J. Reynolds High School, a newspaper called Pine Whispers. Worked my way up there to where I was eventually co-editor-in-chief my senior year. And when I was looking at schools, the only real criteria I had for colleges was two things. One, they had to have a journalism school, and they had to have a Quidditch team. And
Gotcha.
UNC was the place there, and I went there, worked for the DTH a couple of years. Daily Tar Heel was the student newspaper there, and covered all sorts of UNC sports for them. Like I said, covered UNC volleyball quite a bit, covered softball, field hockey, men's and women's soccer, little men's lacrosse. Got a wide breadth there. And then my junior year, I joined an independent website, which was called Argyle Report. Sadly defunct now, can't find it online.
Darn.
Yeah, but it was started by a guy who actually held a position very similar to mine at UNC. His name Turner Walston, who was a staff writer for the athletic department, who had his position cut and wanted to start out on his own. And so I was helping run that site, and that's where I covered, UNC football and men's basketball, little women's basketball, and still covered UNC volleyball as my Olympic niche. So that's really how I kept with print writing. But print jobs are few and far between these days, as we can tell by the staff of the sports section of the D&J, which is just Cecil Joyce.
Holding it down.
So
One-man army.
I ended up going to Disney World initially as a member of the college program, and worked at Kilimanjaro Safaris for a year.
Wow.
Was laid off due to COVID, and then hung around for a bit. Volunteered a bit in Wake Forest Athletic Communications Department, got back into sports writing, and from there, there was a guy named Shelby Salkar that worked at Wake Forest at the time, who came to Wake from Middle Tennessee. And when I saw the staff writer job posted for Middle, I applied there and leaned a bit on Shelby and had good enough clips that they gave me the gig. And now it's year 3, so pretty interesting.
There you go.
Nice. That's awesome. So I love that story. And you were covering UNC and Wake Forest. That's awesome. And of course, being an ACC guy, I can appreciate you covering some ACC
Few and far between in this state, Dylan.
Yeah, that's true. We don't talk about the team I root for, though. That's a whole other story. Miami. Anyway, moving on past that. We don't want to dwell on that. But I do want to ask you this. What has being a staff writer at MTSU taught you over the years? What have you learned about the position and overall?
What have I learned about the position? It's an interesting concept, I think, overall, because obviously at a school like Middle Tennessee, it's very different than my friends that have done the job at UNC that I was familiar with. Because at UNC, they're one of many people in the press room.
Right.
It's sometimes I'm the only one there in these press conferences. Sometimes it's just me and Chip Walters, our radio guy.
Yes.
Sometimes it's me and Calvin White, who's the sidelines reporter, sideline sports editor. So when Calvin's there, he can provide the independent voice. I'm still sort of an athletic department voice.
Right. You work for athletics.
Yes, and so I have to bear that in mind with what I'm writing. And so if you read my stuff on GoBladers.com, I definitely have a more positive spin to the situation, trying to look on the bright side of things most of the time. But I also think I try to be objective about what's happening, and I often lean heavily on stats in my writing in order to do that. And so I think you got to try to find the right balance where you're not just blowing smoke. You need to be able to be honest with people, but you also, people do want to hear the bright side of things. And in particular, I enjoy telling the stories of student athletes. That's the reason why the job appealed to me. And I get to write a feature on a student athlete almost every week here. And so that's really exciting to get to tell some of their stories, how they ended up here at Middle Tennessee, and the wide variety of life experiences that they've had. And here, we have international students that play for a lot of our teams. We have people come from junior colleges, people transferring from other Division I universities, transferring from FCS up to FBS, and hearing how Middle even came on their radar sometimes often can open up interesting conversations. And so I enjoy telling those stories the most, probably. And I think that's something that maybe isn't surprising, but it's glad I figured out now in year 3 that that's something I can lean on, and when things maybe aren't going rough, it's just be these players have really good stories to tell, and we should tell them.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. In terms of MTSU athletics writers and print writers in general when it comes to sports, I think you're absolutely one of the better ones I've ever listened to, or rather read, I guess is the way we will say it. But I do want to tell a brief story, because I was at the MTSU football game on Saturday in the press box, and I was interviewing Dick Palmer, the one of the voices on WGNS radio play-by-play guys, does women's basketball and baseball. And it was just us. I thought that it was just us. So I was like, well, Mr. Palmer, I think that everyone else is gone. And I see Sam over here in the corner, and I'm like, man, look at Sam, still over there. And I think that's a testament to how hard this guy works. He is there at basically every single MTSU event that he can be. You had... there was one time I saw you had a volleyball game beforehand and had to do multiple games in one day. I think that was it the men's basketball game on Thursday night?
So Thursday this past week, we had the Education Day game for the women, which was a 10:30 tip. And then, Lady Raiders destroyed Florida A&M.
Yeah.
And, that wrapped up, pretty, my stuff was around 3 probably. And then, I had a couple hours to kill, so I meandered my way over, through the tunnel between the Murphy Center and the AMG, and and watched the first 2 sets of volleyball and grew very despondent because volleyball did not play that well that night.
Yeah.
Then had to make my way back over to watch a really exciting men's basketball game against Stephen F. Austin that night. So yeah, they have. It's been a very busy week for me because we had 2 different basketball doubleheaders. We had one on Monday night last week as well. That was a true doubleheader, which was really chaotic for me.
Oh yeah.
And then football on Saturday. This week we'll have football and men's basketball on Saturday.
Yep.
I was joking before we got on camera here that I might as well just have a cot in my office at this point. I'm here in the Murphy Center so often, but wouldn't trade it for anything. It's really, really exciting, and the thing I'm most excited about in year 3 now is I've gotten a chance to get out to sports that aren't just football and basketball a lot more than I did my first year here. Like Dylan, I know you and I have seen each other in the soccer press box.
Yes.
A lot.
Every single match.
Being a part of the stat crew for that was one little thing. I'm not writing that thing. I'm just part of helping keep the athletic communications office running in that regard. But even doing something little like that helps keep me a little bit more connected to the athletic department as a whole. And obviously there's certain sports like golf and cross country and track that I just don't get to see as often because they're going all over the place and they often don't compete in a true home match necessarily. Disappointed by that, but hopefully I'll get a chance to watch them at some point soon. I know our cross country, our 3 that qualified for nationals, are on a plane in Charlottesville right now. I saw our cross country coach, Keith Roman, posted a little selfie of them on, I think, the university jet. So nice of the university to provide that for them.
Yeah, really nice to provide that for them. And I'll tell you what, great stuff from you. And make sure to check out the Notebook on GoBlueRaiders.com. Some exceptional storytelling, great stuff, great articles. Mr. Sam Dalton, the head of MTSU Athletics.
Oh, we got a question here.
Oh yeah, this is my I've been saving this all episode long. Sam, one of my favorite encounters I have ever seen was when MT softball was in the conference tournament and they had that game against North Texas. And at the end, it was very funny because MT came out on top after a very questionable call. I will say, very questionable call with the play at the plate to give them the winning run.
It's been long enough. Anise Harvey was out.
Exactly. Yeah, she was out. She was out, plain and simple.
Well, we'll give North Texas some credit now. They're no longer in the league.
Yeah.
She was out. However, you got to go with the call on the field.
Yeah. So one of I'm pretty sure it was a player's mom.
That's correct.
That said this.
It was the mom of one of the outfielders.
Yeah. She said she's better off where she is. Her team is about to get run ruled. Talking about MT. If you have to win by cheating and celebrate it, there's no honor in that. She spelled honor wrong. Enjoy your 5 minutes, and your reward will be staying in a bleep league with 0 talent. Celebrate your mediocrity. Sam quote tweets it and saying, celebrating our mediocrity after MT softball makes the regional final with an elimination game in Tuscaloosa. Sadly, another tough look for her Twitter's predictions. I lost it. And then I quote tweeted and I go, I'm expecting a deleted tweet. What she hasn't, I give her props. She hasn't deleted her tweet. And I said, because my boy Sam kept the receipts and went all in with this tweet. One of my favorite Twitter altercations.
I think my favorite thing about that weekend was that was the second time I did that this weekend because there was just the first game we won against Central Arkansas in that regional. She had said something I think even dumber than that particular tweet. So I led with the best one first. You have to scroll back a little bit further to find it. I don't know if it's in that thread because she was tweeting a lot that weekend.
She was.
But Paula, I don't mind necessarily a player's parent of another team being upset about a bad call, right? Or opposing fan, even opposing administrator or coach being upset about a bad call because that happens sometimes. That's the way to get out some steam.
Yes.
Where I draw the line is where you're using it to disparage the other team's success. And so I thought what she said was rather unbecoming of particularly someone who is a parent to an athlete. So I just, used the little bookmark feature that Twitter had and said, okay, if we win some games in Tuscaloosa, I'll get a chance to pull this out. And I think that was the thing that I think was because the way that she was talking, you saw a little bit in that tweet. Paula Cobb was talking about how his team didn't deserve it. This team's going to get run ruled in the regional. They don't deserve to be there.
Toe with Alabama.
I mean, they're one swing away from defeating Alabama and going and playing in a regional final. And I think everybody around us, we might have been the 6th seed in Conference USA that year, but everyone knew that softball had that ability. I knew softball had that ability. And they went down there and showed that ability. And so I was just letting our friend in North Texas know that you know, they had shown the ability that she doubted, and maybe to, you know, be a little kinder next time.
Yeah, she has another tweet. It's the same thing. It says, more likely, this is to all 4-1 USA on Twitter. She responds to that Twitter account going, more likely your team will get run rolled twice. That's what happens when you shouldn't be there. Has 7.3 thousand views on that tweet. On that tweet.
And that's where we're going to cut it. Before we get
shout out to
any
Paula
further
Cobb,
into
by
it.
the way.
But you know what? Sam was just trying to let her know the truth, and I can appreciate
I don't get to do that
truth.
often on my Twitter account, and softball is a sport where it feels
right.
more culturally acceptable, I guess.
College softball gets intense.
To do that a little bit.
Understandable. Well, anyway, it's been, I think, maybe the best episode of CUSA All Access yet. Definitely the longest. I'm sure my producers are probably going to be upset, but you know what? I thought it was great content. So, Sam, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a great episode, and thanks for all the great knowledge that you've given us to us today. But that's going to do it. It's the season finale, and we appreciated the ride that you've taken with us all season. Hope you'll join us again in 2024. But for Ryan Martinelich, Baby Gator, and today Mr. Sam Doughton, I'm Dylan Simmons saying so long. Thank you so much for watching CUSA All Access, and remember to always have an electric night.